On an early morning in December of 1991, just before the sun came up, a woman living in a quiet neighborhood in Largo, Florida, was suddenly pulled out of her sleep by a loud, frantic pounding coming from her front door. At first, she thought she was dreaming, but then it came again, louder this time, faster, and underneath the pounding, there was something else, a voice, screaming, not angry, not calling out a name, but screaming for help. She sat up in bed, completely still, listening. The kind of scream that doesn't sound human at first. High, desperate, like someone who knows they might not survive. And that's when she knew this wasn't a mistake. Something was very wrong. She threw off her blanket, ran out of her bedroom, and rushed down the hallway toward the front door. The pounding didn't stop. It just kept coming, rapid, uneven, almost weak, like whoever was out there was running out of strength. She reached the door, her hand hovering for just a second, and then she pulled it open. And instantly, everything changed. Standing on her front porch was her neighbor, but it didn't look like her anymore. Her entire body was covered in blood. Not just small cuts, not just a little bit, but soaked. From her hair down to her clothes, dripping onto the wooden porch beneath her feet. Her face was barely recognizable. Deep gashes ran across her head, her skin torn open in multiple places, and her throat, it had been cut. Badly. So badly that when she tried to speak, nothing came out. Just a wet, choking sound. For a split second, the woman in the doorway couldn't move. Her brain couldn't process what she was seeing. Because this wasn't something that happened here. Not in this neighborhood. Not on this street. But then suddenly, the injured woman swayed forward, her legs giving out beneath her. And she collapsed, right there on the front porch, unconscious, bleeding out. And as the homeowner dropped to her knees, trying to understand what had just happened, one terrifying thought began to form, slowly, quietly, in the back of her mind. That woman didn't just come from nowhere. She came from somewhere nearby, and wherever that place was, whatever had done this to her could still be there, waiting. Because at that exact same moment, just a few houses away, inside a quiet brown house, behind closed doors, something violent had already happened. Something brutal. And whatever it was, it hadn't been over for very long. Just a few hours earlier, on the evening of December 14th, 1991, everything felt completely normal. Inside a quiet neighborhood in Largo, Florida, a man named Keith Young stood near the front door of his home, reaching for his car keys. Behind him, his wife Anita adjusted her heels, getting ready for a rare night out. For them, this was not just dinner. It was something they almost never had. Time alone. Between the two of them, they had 6 children from previous marriages. 6. Which meant quiet nights did not really exist. But tonight was different. Keith's kids were staying with their mother. Anita's daughter was at a sleepover, and her 12-year-old son, Jason, had agreed to stay home and watch the younger kids. For once, the house would be calm. Before leaving, Keith turned to Jason and gave him a quick list of rules. Keep things clean. Make sure everyone gets to bed. And if anything went wrong, he pointed toward the kitchen. I wrote the restaurant number down, right there. Jason gave a small nod, a little impatient.
Yeah, I got it.
But Keith did not move right away, because there was something else. Something he had not said yet. Earlier that year, someone had tried to break into their house. Not just once. They had cut the phone lines, removed a window screen, tried forcing a door open, and then, for no clear reason, they left. No one was caught. No explanation. Just silence. And ever since that night, Keith had never felt fully comfortable leaving the kids alone. So he looked back at Jason for just a second longer. If it's a real emergency, he paused. Don't call me. Jason looked up, now paying attention. Call 911. This time, he nodded seriously. Okay. A few minutes later, Keith and Anita stepped outside, closed the door behind them, and walked toward the car. But before leaving, Keith reached back and checked the handle. Locked. Just to be sure. Less than an hour later, they were sitting across from each other at a restaurant. For the first time in a long time, everything felt calm. They talked, laughed, enjoyed the quiet. But beneath that calm, there were cracks. Anita's ex-husband, Luther, had a history, a bad temper, and even living far away, he still found ways to cause problems. Keith had his own situation. His ex-wife, Linda, was fighting him over custody, arguments, pressure, even threats of court. 2 past relationships, both unfinished, both tense, still reaching into their lives. But that night, they chose to ignore it. Because for once, they just wanted something normal. And for a while, that is exactly what they had. When they got home, everything looked fine. The kids were watching TV. The house felt safe. Keith let out a small breath of relief. Nothing had gone wrong. He told the kids to get ready for bed. And before Jason walked away, Keith pulled him in for a quick hug. Good job tonight. Simple words. But they mattered. Because neither of them knew that was the last normal moment they would ever have. Hours later, the house went dark. Doors closed. Lights off. Silence filled every room. Outside, the night stood still. Quiet. Heavy. But not empty. Because somewhere in that darkness, someone was already there. Watching. Waiting. And this time, they were not going to leave. Several hours later, in the middle of the night, the house was completely silent. No TV. No footsteps. No voices. Just darkness. At around 3 a.m., Jason woke up. Not suddenly, but slowly, like something had pulled him out of sleep. At first, he didn't move. He just lay there, staring into the dark, trying to understand why he was awake. And then, he heard it. A sound. Low. Heavy. A thump. Somewhere down the hallway. Jason sat up. His breathing slowed. He listened carefully. Another sound, closer this time. Like something moving. Then, suddenly, a scream. Sharp. Violent. Jason froze. Because he recognized that voice. It was his mom. His body reacted before his mind did. He climbed down from the top bunk and walked toward the door. Slowly, carefully, he reached the door and pushed it open just a few inches. The hallway was dark, but not empty. At first, he only saw movement. 2 figures. Struggling. One of them slammed into the wall. A loud crash echoed through the house. Jason's heart started pounding as his eyes adjusted. And then he realized. One of them was Keith. The other was not. The second figure was bigger, dressed in black, wearing a ski mask. Jason couldn't see a face. Just movement. Fast. Violent. Then, a flash. A blade. And in that moment, Jason understood. This wasn't confusion. This was an attack. Keith tried to fight back, but the intruder was too strong. Then Jason saw it. Blood. On the wall, on the floor, spreading across the hallway. More than he had ever seen. His body froze. Then, suddenly, the bedroom door burst open. Anita ran out, already covered in blood, holding a baseball bat. Without hesitation, she swung it. The bat struck the intruder, but it barely slowed him down. "Get the gun!" Keith shouted. Anita turned and ran. Jason stood there, unable to move, watching everything through the small opening in the door. Then the intruder grabbed Keith and threw him back into the bedroom. A heavy thud echoed through the house. A moment later, Anita came back, holding a gun. For a brief second, everything stopped. Then the intruder turned and ran out the front door. Gone. Silence returned. But it didn't feel safe. Jason stood there, shaking. Then he remembered what Keith had said. If it's a real emergency, call 911. Jason ran to the kitchen, grabbed the phone, and dialed. His hands were trembling. He lifted the receiver and waited. Nothing. No dial tone. Just silence. Jason stared at the phone, confused and terrified. Then he heard movement behind him. He turned. Anita stood in the doorway, barely able to stand, blood dripping from her neck. The phone. "It's dead," Jason said. She looked at him and whispered, "Go stay with him. I'll get help." Then she turned and walked out into the night. Jason slowly walked back to the bedroom. Keith was lying on the bed, barely breathing. Jason didn't know what to do, so he knelt down beside him and took his hand. He held it tightly, waiting, hoping. And in the silence, he listened as Keith took one breath, then another, each one weaker than the last, until finally, there was nothing. Several hours later, just before sunrise, the quiet street in Largo, Florida, was no longer quiet. Police cars lined the road. Red and blue lights reflected softly against the nearby houses. Crime scene tape stretched across the front yard of a small brown home. Standing just outside that line was Detective Mike Short. He had been called in with very little information. A home invasion. Multiple victims. One dead. That was all he knew. But as he stepped closer to the house, something felt off. Something about this scene did not feel random. The front door was still open. Before even stepping inside, he saw it. Blood. On the porch. On the doorway. Leading into the house. As if whatever had happened inside had tried to escape. But didn't make it far. Short stepped inside. The living room was a mess. Blood smeared across the walls. Across the furniture. Across the floor. Chaotic. Violent. Everywhere he looked, there were signs of a struggle. That told him one thing immediately. Whoever did this did not expect resistance. As he moved slowly down the hallway, the scene became worse. The walls were marked with streaks of blood. Handprints. Smears. Like someone had been trying to stay upright while losing strength. At the end of the hall, he reached the bedroom. And stopped. Keith Young lay on the bed, motionless, his shirt torn open. Deep wounds across his chest. Too many to count. Short didn't need to step closer. He already understood. This wasn't just an attack. It was personal. But something didn't add up. There was no weapon. Not anywhere. Short turned away and continued down the hall. He opened another door. Inside, 2 small children were still asleep, completely unaware. Just a few feet away from where everything had happened. That's when Short knew. This case was not going to be simple. Outside the house, he began searching the area. And then he saw it. The phone lines. Cut cleanly. Deliberately. Short paused for a moment. That single detail changed everything. This was not panic. This was not random. Someone had planned this. At least part of it. Later that morning, Short sat across from the only eyewitness. Jason, wrapped in a blanket. Still in his pajamas. 12 years old. Trying to describe something no child should ever see. A man in a ski mask. Dressed in black. Holding a blade. Silent the entire time. Jason said he couldn't see the man's face clearly. But there was one detail he remembered. A small glimpse of skin. Dark. Short wrote it down, but he wasn't fully convinced. It had been dark. Fast. Confusing. Memory could be unreliable. A few hours later, Anita briefly regained consciousness at the hospital. Short leaned in and asked her one question. "Do you know who did this?" She shook her head. "No. A stranger." But before she lost consciousness again, she added something else. Something small, but important. "There was a break-in months ago." She paused, struggling to speak. "They cut the phone lines. Back then, too." That detail stayed with him. Back at the station, names began to surface. People connected to the victims. People with possible motives. Keith's ex-wife, Linda. Ongoing custody issues. Tension. Conflict. Her new husband, Steve. Quiet, but protective. Then Anita's ex-husband, Luther. Known for his temper. A history of problems. 3 possible directions. 3 possible motives. But there was a problem. None of them matched the description. And yet, the more Short looked at the case, the more one feeling grew stronger. This didn't feel random. It felt targeted. Personal. But if that was true, then why the mask? Why stay silent? Why cut the phone lines and still leave chaos behind? Nothing fully made sense. And as the investigation moved forward, one possibility slowly began to take shape. Maybe they were not looking for just one person. Or worse, maybe they were looking in the wrong direction. For weeks, the case went nowhere. Detective Short followed every lead, every suspect, every possibility, but nothing stuck. No weapon, no confession, no clear answer. Only fragments, pieces that refused to come together. Then, one day, everything changed. A phone call came in. A woman. Her voice was quiet. Careful. But she sounded certain. She said she had information about Luther, Anita's ex-husband. At first, it didn't make sense. Luther lived across the country, too far away to be involved. At least, that's what it seemed. But the woman kept talking, and slowly, the truth started to take shape. Luther had been planning this for months. He had already been to that house once before, late at night. He had cut the phone lines. Just like this time, he had been ready to go inside, ready to act. But something stopped him. He hesitated, and then he left. That night, he walked away. But this time, he didn't. Investigators later discovered that Luther had secretly flown to Florida. He used a fake identity, a different name, something that wouldn't be traced back to him. In the early hours of December 15th, he returned. Slowly. Carefully. He approached the house again. He cut the phone lines. Same method. Same place. Then he went inside. Prepared. Armed. Certain. His target was never Keith. It was Anita. In his mind, this was not murder. This was control. This was something he believed had to be done. He thought Anita was failing their children, that she was ruining their future, and the only way to fix it was to remove her. But nothing went as planned. She woke up. She fought back. Keith fought back, stronger than he expected. The quiet plan turned into chaos, noise, blood, resistance. And when Anita grabbed the bat, everything changed. The control was gone. The plan was broken. So Luther ran. He left Keith dying, left Anita severely injured, and escaped into the night. Later, he removed the mask, walked calmly down the street, blending in like nothing had happened. When he was finally arrested, he didn't deny it. He confessed, calm, clear, as if he had already justified everything long before that night. There was no second attacker, no hidden accomplice, no random intruder. Just one man, one decision, and one belief. He didn't think he was the villain. He believed he was right. And that is what made it terrifying. Because sometimes the most dangerous people are not hiding in the dark. They are the ones who truly believe they belong there.